Welcome aboard the ADOTAT Show, where marking, media, and Adtech converge. Fasten your seatbelts as your host, Pesat Latin steers you through the digital world of advertising trends and marketing innovation.
Deserve to win when it matters most. Facing multi-billion-dollar bet-the-company litigation? No problem. That's why we're here. Troutman Amin, LLP is a true legal powerhouse.
All right, we're introducing Anthony Katsur. He's the CEO of the IAB Tech Lab. The IAB Tech Lab was birthed in 2014. It crafts the machetes of technology and standards to clear a path for growth and trust in the online wilderness, armed with an arsenal from the OpenRTB to Project RERC or REARC. I don't know if we say it or just the letters.
Project REARC.
REARC. And a band of publishers, ad wizards, and digital crusaders by its side. Anthony Katsur is a distinguished figure in the media technology realm, boasting over 25 years of leadership and expertise across innovative companies in the digital media sector. As the former senior vice president at Nexstar Media Group, he played a pivotal role in steering strategy, technology, and corporate development, significantly impacting the largest local broadcaster in the U.S., with a history of leadership positions, including president of Sonobi and executive roles at Rubicon Project, MediaMath, and Maxifier. Katsur has been instrumental in shaping the future of digital advertising and is a sought-after speaker in major industry events. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the IAB Tech Lab and mainly the IAB ALM, the Leadership Summit. First of all, Anthony, after the IAB Leadership Summit, can you share some of the most eyebrow-raising predictions for the ad tech industry? Any chance it involves time-traveling cookies?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the theme of ALM this year was certainly cookie deprecation, privacy sandbox, new forms of addressability in our ecosystem. That weighed heavily on the agenda. But there was also considerable discussion around the future of CTV. The convergence of linear and connected television was also a very active topic. New forms of, again, addressability in the forms of data clean rooms and other alternative kind of ID-less signals was a big part of the conversation at ALM as well. So it was a diverse series of topics, but of course, signal loss, I think, is what dominated the industry. But I think there was fair amounts of gloom and doom, as well as innovation. What I noticed at this year's ALM was a clear infusion of new talent, companies I hadn't come across, recently or only in the past couple years that are thinking about the future of this industry differently than perhaps, some of its early proponents, myself included, have thought about it. So there was a mixture of how is the industry going to tackle signal loss, whether it's third-party cookie deprecation, obfuscation of the IP, additional privacy regulations. But how's the industry going to innovate around that and solve for that? So it was a mix of trepidation and I think of cautious optimism of what the future of our ecosystem is going to look like.
Is the industry ready, or is this like akin to a 5-year-old's birthday party pinata aftermath? Do we know what we're doing?
That's a great question. I think there's pockets of readiness. I think if I'm going to say, is the industry ready overall for signal loss? I still think there's a fair amount of work to be done. That said, I think there's interesting pockets of innovation that are occurring either at a publisher, an ad technology level, where I think some will be more prepared than others. My bigger concern is really the impact that these changes are going to have on the mid and long tail of our ecosystem. Not everyone has the resources of a large media company. Not everyone has the resources of large ad tech or big tech companies. So the question is, who's going to be left behind? I think we are looking at potentially at an ecosystem of haves and have-nots, depending on the resources that those companies have available to them.
What's the missing ingredient?
Missing ingredient. I think the missing ingredient is, it's all over the board. There's legal compliance issues. So I think it's a combination of legal resources to make sure you're compliant with state and federal regulations. particularly as it becomes more of a patchwork, not just in the US. We keep talking about these state level privacy laws, but there's privacy laws popping up across the globe. India, Brazil, Japan has a law now in the books. There's a bill being currently deliberated in Australian Parliament. India, India, the largest country on the planet in terms of population, just passed a privacy regulation that they're going to flesh out throughout this year. So I think it's legal resources is a challenge. And then I think there's technical and data science resources as the industry, I think, moves more towards, I think the industry where we ultimately settle at some point is probably some form of cohort and lookalike models based off of very rich, high fidelity seed signal, for the consumers that haven't opted out. So I think there's also technical and data science resourcing that's an issue. Ad operations, as people have to visit, these kind of new paradigms like privacy sandbox, like that's going to fundamentally change kind of the ad operations model for both publishers and for agencies. So it runs the gamut, to be candid. Like there's no one area I'd be like, oh, if they just hired a few more people there, they'd be sorted. It's not that simple, unfortunately.
So to go back to the privacy sandbox situation, it's not going to be a one-to-one replacement for third-party cookies. How do you envision bridging the gaps that were identified, especially in areas like ad placement guarantees and budget management?
There are a lot of challenges in the design of the privacy sandbox. Tech Lab is releasing its analysis of the privacy sandbox to the industry tomorrow. We've assessed 46 total use cases. Everything from competitive ad separation, robust support for digital video, ensuring buyers do not bid themselves up in the programmatic landscape. And many of them, frankly, are not supported. So I think there's real...
30 marketing use cases were not supported by the privacy sandbox, if I remember the report.
I think that was from a Digiday report. They didn't actually have access to the assessment itself. I don't have the final number off the top of my head, but I think it's 30 plus that are either temporarily supported for a period of time, they're degraded, they're just flat out not supported, or they're what we deem is impractical. Like it's so impractical to do it this way that it creates undue business burden on either a publisher, an agency, Adtech, all three constituents. So that's how we classified everything. So there's varying degrees of either degraded support, impractical, not supported, temporarily supported. I think there's a lot more change. Look, the privacy sandbox is a work in progress. Google has a 5-year roadmap that they're pursuing. So this is going to be an ongoing set of changes the industry is going to have to deal with over the next several years. But our report is not going to be, I think, a surprise to many folks as they read, or maybe it will be a surprise to folks as they read it. There are a lot of challenges with some of the building blocks that the privacy sandbox has created for the industry, and the fact that the building blocks don't quite solve some core fundamental advertising use cases for the ecosystem. The industry does not expect a one-to-one replacement for third-party cookies, so I'm going to make that abundantly clear. We realize there needs to be some compromise between advertising utility and consumer privacy. We just find a lot of the use cases fall short of finding that balance between advertising utility and privacy.
Are there any critical use cases that are currently in limbo, and how is the IAB Tech Lab going to address those cases?
That's a good question. So the purpose of the assessment was to do three things. One, inform the industry. Like our remit is to inform, support, create standards for the industry. So it was inform the industry of like, these are the changes that are coming. Hey, publisher, are you aware of this? Hey, agency, hey, brand, are you aware of these things? That was number one. Number two was to act as a call to action to those that are not aware of these changes. I mean, I can probably count on both hands and maybe one foot the number of, I think, publishers that really have a deep understanding of what the implications are. What are the business implications of this to the ecosystem? So the second reason was it's this call to action. Get engaged with the Chrome team, start testing, get engaged with Tech Lab, like get informed, because this is coming. I don't think it's a question of I don't think it's a question of if the third party cookie goes away. I think it's a question of when, right? So there's been all this deliberation like, oh, Chrome may push the date, or the CMA, the Competitive Markets Authority in the UK may push the date. Those are all fine to have those discussions. But I think as an industry, we need to prepare for this is happening. It's happening this year. You need to get prepared as best as possible. The third reason we relaunched it was to really give product feedback to Chrome. Like, this is where the industry sees shortcomings in the product, invite Chrome in to either clarify certain use cases, because we really struggled with documentation. The documentation, candidly, has been all over the place. Whether it's you're going into the GitHub repository, you're going into the sandbox development resources, looking at support tickets, things like that. It's been very hard to isolate kind of use cases. It becomes this, it's like navigating the matrix to some extent. So, the third reason was give Chrome feedback, have Chrome clarify some of our assessments. Like, did we assess this correctly based on the documentation that we have? And then concerns that we have, like Chrome, what are some workarounds? And then finally, is there compromise the industry can find with Chrome to, again, find that balance between privacy and advertising utility that in some areas the privacy sandbox doesn't support?
Yeah, the feedback loop I've heard is needs to be fixed. Is there a specific place of feedback that the IAB Tech Lab has provided to Google that you think could actually significantly impact the effectiveness of the privacy sandbox for the broader industry?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, look, Google's on our board. Google's a big organization, by the way. We work with Google on myriad initiatives. I think we've had several meetings with the Chrome team. We met with them after ALM for 2 hours. We met with them at CES. They've also presented to the Tech Lab board on a couple occasions. So there's definitely engagement there. They were not part of the task force. I think they realized, perhaps better for the industry to go off and assess this on their own without, no one wants to be told their baby's ugly when their baby's in the room. Right? So there's a fair amount, no one wants to be criticized when you're in the room, right? So I think, I really do commend Chrome for letting the task force do its thing. We announced it in late August, early September. And they let us do our thing, and we're going to publish this to the industry. We welcome their comments, and I think the Tech Lab's a great venue to perhaps partner more deeply with Chrome on future iterations of the sandbox. And again, to their credit and to their points, there are things that are not done. Fence frames isn't a finalized thing. They're still looking for industry feedback. Solving for digital video, they're still working on. So there's a lot of areas to partner with Chrome on this, as long as they're open to industry feedback to improve it.
Yeah, before we move on, in layman's terms, do you see that the sandbox is either a magic trick, a science experiment, and why are some people hesitant to be tribute to this experiment?
I think digital advertising is a 30-year experiment. I think.
Have we figured it out yet?
I think it's software. I think it's software that's in alpha or beta stage, is where it is. And I think the industry, as it starts to put it through its paces, will provide feedback to Chrome to improve it. So I wouldn't call it an experiment. In software parlance, I think it's somewhere between alpha and beta, and it needs work.
Right, moving on, the AI's role in marketing has been emphasized as augmenting rather than replacing human intelligence. Can you share an example where AI surprised you by showing a hint of creativity or wit that made you do a double take?
I mean, no.
You're just not. You're not impressed yet.
No. Well, look. I think it depends on how do we want to define AI, right? AI has been in our ecosystem since the first DSPs and SSPs walked the earth. Right? Machine
learning, or whatever you want to call it.
That is a subset. That's a subset of AI.
A lot of it's just if then, if this, then this happens. Simple programming.
Sure. I mean, so look, the decision trees that DSPs originally built to inform how to optimize campaigns is a form of rote machine learning. The original yield curves SSPs developed to maximize yield for publishers, form of machine learning, right? I think we're early days of AI. The reason I say I haven't yet is because I still think it's really early to, what's the impact of neural networks and large language models and recursive AI? Like, there's so many different flavors and variants that could influence this ecosystem. I don't think we've quite seen the impact, the positive impact yet. I think it's there. I think there's strong implications around privacy. When I mentioned earlier, I think where the industry's headed at some point is some form of like strong seed signal that then powers a lot of cohort and lookalike models that are potentially ID-less. I think that'll be largely AI driven for sure. So I think that's some of the promise we just haven't seen yet. I think true, actual, real creative optimization. Like, so if I live next door to you, and you and I both see a Pepsi ad, you're going to see a somewhat different creative than I will. Like, that's pretty powerful. So I don't think we've quite seen the power and the robustness that AI can bring to our industry yet. I just don't think it's matured where it's. There are startups out there that are certainly doing things with AI around advertising models and optimization, but I don't think it's not mainstream enough yet.
Right. The summit also brought up significant concerns about child safety online. An industry focused on innovation and growth, how do we ensure the digital playground is safe as the physical one without wrapping everything in bubble wrap?
That's a heck of a question. Yeah, we actually had Marsha Blackburn on stage, and she's been a big proponent and sponsor of the COSA Act. I think it's a combination of working both with governments worldwide and to some extent following their lead in terms of regulations that they're passing. In terms of technical frameworks we can put in place, it's hard when you're dealing with a device, right? You don't know who's on the other end of that device to know, is this a child or not? Like, sure, you can age gate. I think that affords you some legal protection, but I have an 11-and-a-half-year-old son. He can go ahead to any website and say he's 18 all the live long day. Like, how do you really prove that out?
Kids were sneaking porn magazines from their parents 40 years ago. It's not going to change.
Right. That's not going to change. Like kids are always going to find a way. I was sneaking beers as a teenager, right? So, we're always going to find a way around it. I can't think of any kind of good technical frameworks without some form of signal to understand that this is a human of a certain age, that they're restricted to this sort of content.
Well, I think everyone I spoke about, it says it's education. I mean, when it comes to everything from privacy to protecting children online, it's education. That people have an idea what privacy is, the idea of what child protection is online, but they're not necessarily educated about what exactly is happening. Because I think it was Lou Pascal says everyone just clicks. I agree to everything. It doesn't really know what's behind it. And I think it's the same thing behind child protection online. People really aren't sure what their kids are doing because they're not educated. They don't. They hear things about TikTok. They don't know what their kids doing on TikTok.
Right. Well, I think that's the other side of kind of the same coin when you try to explain the value of advertising to your average consumer. Like, I had a conversation this morning. I had this exact conversation this morning. Someone's telling me, my grandmother gets so annoyed by these retargeting ads. She's like, yeah, I just wish the ads would go away. I go, you got to frame the question differently. Like, okay, so let's say ads go away and now you're getting asked for your email address, your phone number, or you're having to pay for all content online. Do you want that? Well, no. Well, okay, well, ads subsidize a lot of that content that you get quote unquote for free. I think the same conversation needs to happen around child safety. To your point, like, it's hard to educate. It's so hard to educate the consumers on that value exchange for digital advertising in exchange for quote unquote free content or subsidized content. How do we do the same thing when it comes to child safety? That is something that this industry consumer education, I should say, is something this industry has struggled with. Therefore, I think the only way to do it is working with regulators. Like, regulators represent the people. Can we work more closely with regulators and get them educated so they can pass smart laws to enforce child safety? And then what does the industry do, either from a legal perspective, a technical standard, to ensure that those things are enforced? There's no easy answer.
I think I've had guests say that if we don't work with regulators, they're going to force us, and that's actually where we are at now. We've been 100%. Some people, I think one person said we were so greedy that we refuse to do anything, and now we're being forced to have all these solutions and all these things thrown at us. I mean, one person said you can look at the GDPR is a direct result of us refusing to be innovative in the face of all this. Speaking of that,
I don't disagree, and I think things like the GDPR, while frustrating, while the GDPR can be maddening in some areas because there's a bit of a catch-22 in terms of how the regulations have been written. There's not a lot of case law. Same thing with CCPA. They have forced the industry, and this is a good thing, to stand up and make privacy a priority. And I think that's a healthy thing for consumers and for the ecosystem. Now, I think we've skewed very, very much in one direction around consumer privacy. There has to be a balance between consumer privacy and data security. By the way, we've conflated those two things. Consumer privacy and data security, we've conflated. I think consumers do inherently understand or subconsciously understand the value exchange of like, yes, I'm offering up some information about myself in exchange for this recipe or, this getting back into shape article or something like that, in exchange for something about myself so I can be advertised to. I think they're less concerned about privacy as long as their data secured. The minute there's a security breach, data security issue, that's where I think privacy, whether it's egregious or malicious, right? Where their data is going out the back door intentionally and being sold without the consumer's knowledge, or there's unfortunately a security breach. We've conflated those two things, and I think those two things are very separate. But we also don't need to skew so far that the web becomes you lose. Look, we already have a wealth inequality problem in the U.S. and actually the Western civilization. What we don't want to have is a data access inequality problem where, yeah, sure, I can cover paywalls all day long, no problem, but not everyone can. And they should have access to the same investigative journalism, the same news, the same digital services as I do. So how do we don't want to skew so far where we impact advertising utility to such a fault that we're living in a balkanized web of paywalls.
The summit hinted at a future where deep pockets and differentiation become survival tools. If ad tech companies were superheroes, what power do you think would be most crucial for their survival in this evolving landscape? You briefly touched on this already.
What superpower?
The haves and the have-nots you mentioned.
I think innovation is a key superpower. I think innovation, particularly in the areas of data science, consumer experience. Never underestimate a great consumer experience. I mean, if you look at, I'm trying to think of some examples where it's like, wow, that's a really good UI. YouTube TV, great UI. I mean, YouTube TV is cable reinvented. Phenomenal user interface. It's great, right? So I think the user experience always needs to be paramount. I think innovation in the areas of data science, I think, are key, particularly in a burgeoning paradigm of signal loss in the industry. I think that's another key superpower. But I think innovation at its core, I think, is a critical superpower for publishers, for Adtech, for agencies.
Right. And there was a section on DNA data storage. How long do you think it'll be before we start seeing ads personalized on our genetic makeup?
Not in our lifetime.
No. You think the privacy people are just going to consider it's too intrusive? Or the technology
I don't even know it's a privacy issue. Just the technology is not there. Right? The tech isn't there. So,
right.
I think there is fair concern and consideration around, who has access to my DNA. Right. That's a bit different than a cookie.
I don't think. The thing is, I don't know if the average consumer knew the difference between a cookie and DNA. Because when you ask the average consumer why these cookies should be gotten rid of, they're like, "Well, I didn't want all my private information shared." And if you explain to them a cookie probably had no private information whatsoever, and we can still share that information with strings.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, but I mean, you make a great point. That's the thing. The cookie has powered interoperability of this ecosystem for 25 years, right? That's how this entire ecosystem is interoperated largely on the premise of the cookie. There is no government regulation I'm aware of that indicts the cookie, right? Like the cookie's not the bad actor here. Bad actors are bad actors.
Right.
So yeah, but I think you make a great point. This goes back to consumer education around consumers don't understand, they're just like, yeah, I'm being tracked. It's like, well, yeah, but you also realize you have the power to delete that cookie at any point in time. Like you can remove those tokens anytime you want, clear your browser cache, etc. So
Yeah,
I think the
private
cookie's
browsing, it's in my opinion, it was the most ridiculous move ever. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I think
the cookie doing anything bad. It wasn't like Flash, which had to be removed from everyone's computer because it was actually a security risk. Cookies were actually the opposite. They were the least security risk ever.
Agreed.
Right, so what was your favorite part of ALM, and why was it Peter Naylor and Andy Sorkin?
I was in a lot of meetings, so I didn't get a lot of main stage. My favorite part of so I'll break it into two components. My favorite part of ALM on stage was the great measurability debate. I think that's always spicy, and this was particularly spicy. I don't know if it was spicy as New York City 2 years ago, but this one was pretty spicy. So having iSpot, Video Amp, Nielsen, and Comscore up there on stage is always always gets a bit fiery.
Right.
Because they all bring their own forms of value to the ecosystem, and I think they all approach measurements differently. So I think that was highly entertaining. It was also informative. Like there were I think they were informed arguments. So it wasn't just a lot of bluster. I think the other thing I loved about ALM this year in particular, the industry as a whole really, privacy remains at the forefront of how the industry is thinking. So there's very much this privacy first kind of consideration now that frankly wasn't in the industry several years ago. Like everything's like, well, does that comply with regulations, or like how is that going to be perceived from a privacy angle? So I think that's at the forefront for sure. And I think how to solve some of these things. Again, what was refreshing this year, there feels to me kind of a generational changing of the guard coming to our ecosystem, where the next generation of this industry has been largely innovated by Gen X. I think we're starting to see the millennials weigh in on the future of the industry. So there's a lot of interesting new startups or companies that may be 3 or 4 years old that are starting to gain momentum. And it was nice to see a lot of those, frankly, new, younger faces that are the future of our ecosystem. So this was the first year I really noticed that. Like, myriad companies, not that I'm like a who's who, but like myriad companies I hadn't heard of or only vaguely aware of that I got a chance to meet informally or formally over the 2.5 days in Florida. That was, it was nice to see. It's like the industry lives on, the industry will thrive on, there will be another chapter. So that was nice.
And can you share a lighthearted moment or unexpected laugh that reminded everyone why they love working in the industry?
Lighthearted moment. Several. Comment. There was a comment in one meeting where we were talking about the impact of signal loss in general to ad technology. And there was a comment. It was a bunch of us in a room, and someone said, "No one gives a crap about ad tech."
Outside the industry, or even in the industry?
Well, no, but again, it was a laughable moment because one would say it's true. I feel like ad tech is like the supply chain. Ad tech is like the shipping industry, right? Like no one thinks twice about cargo shipping, the national rail or truckers until and we saw this come during COVID and coming out of during COVID when there was all this demand for goods at home went through the roof. We had these major supply chain issues. No one thinks twice about ad tech until there are supply chain issues, right? So
right.
It was humorous in the fact that many of these companies, our parents and relatives who aren't in the industry have never heard of, but they make a material impact to the industry. Like without ad tech, where would publishers be? Where would agencies be without programmatic, right? So it was just funny that someone made that comment of like, well, no one cares about ad tech.
Before we go, if you could send a text message to yourself 30 years ago, what would you tell yourself?
Gosh, 30 years ago, what would I tell myself?
Or when you started in the industry, about 25 years ago, I assume.
No one's ever asked me this question.
We had Chip Gook to say, tell myself to party more. That was his.
I think I would say to myself, be more patient. I think
about the industry or in general?
Well, both.
Are people in the industry? That's what I need, is to learn patience about people in the industry.
No, I think I don't know. I don't know if I would change a thing.
You want to tell yourself anything?
I mean, I don't know. Buy more Google stock. I don't know.
That's what I bring up a lot. I always bring up a lot that in 1995 is when Bill Gates' book came out, and I was sitting with my father, 20 years old, in his house in Brooklyn. He was president at Brooklyn College at the time, and I said, if we had bought stock, Microsoft stock 10 years ago, we'd be billionaires by now. The funny thing is, if in 1995 I bought stock, it has doubled and split almost 6 times. I would be billionaires if I bought then too. So, yeah, maybe you're right.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
why the stock now?
I don't know what I would tell myself. I mean, I've been in the ecosystem now for 25 years. It's been an incredible run. I love it. I love what I do. I love the industry. There is never, ever a dull moment in this ecosystem. It's mentally stimulating. It's also fun. It's challenging, exhausting, and enlightening all at the same time. I don't know what I would tell myself.
Do you have a secret sauce or like a mantra or pep talk you give yourself? So many years to keep going.
Yes, every morning for it's been almost 2 decades now. I read the Bene Gesserit mantra. It's on my desk. Dune.
You serious? Oh no, you're actually serious. Oh my goodness.
I'm dead serious.
A Dune reference. I love it.
Dead serious. Yes, Dune reference for those that are not familiar. Yeah.
It's my second Dune reference this month. I wrote a whole article about Dune recently.
Fear is the mind killer. Never give up. Never say down. I'll never quit. Like, yeah, that's how you keep going. Like, it's.
You're looking forward to the next part 2.
I have a passion for this. Yes.
You're looking forward to that.
Oh yeah, I think part 1. I think he nailed it, and I think part 2 is going to be outstanding. I can't wait to go see it.
Hey, well, thank you so much. Hope to get you on a roundtable. I appreciate your time. I know you're busy.
Would love to.
I'm glad we finally got this done.
Me too. If I can come up for air, the next month's pretty nutty, but I think March, April, I'll have a bit more free time. Would love to participate in a roundtable. I thought the one you had with Shiv and the rest of the folks was really fun. It was informative, but also like everyone was having a good time. So I'm happy to do it when I get some time.
And that's all, folks. Please consider sponsoring ADOTAT to keep independent and really witty tech journalism alive. We can't run this on good feelings and rainbows.